But you've got a great Venn diagram that you kind of traverse through the book, and it's got three circles that intersect in the middle being success as a marketeer, and and they're all they're kind of, I kind of think of them as different components, kind of at different levels. And I thought it was interesting. I'd just love to hear how you pick these three components of your Venn diagram, which is thought leadership, which I always think about like branding and the content there, but then content strategy. It's like, well, that's kind of content too. And social media, which arguably is another form of content, but also the conversation with the prospect and the customers. Why do you see those as the three circles that you need to make cross to be successful?
So it's funny because as I've made my way around different specialties in marketing, I started at much smaller companies where I was more of a generalist, kind of owning all of marketing, working on a bunch of different projects. During my time at Atlassian, which is a much larger company that has specialist teams, I've worked in content marketing, I've worked in product marketing, and now I sit in life cycle, which is kind of that demand gen piece of it. And so it's interesting because I didn't set out to define those three diagrams in the sense of like, what are the things? It's more in my day job as I was tackling problems and finding that I needed to explain. And it's funny, you were correct that the Venn diagram says content strategy, that playground. Since I sent the book off, I would actually say that that should really be more about journey mapping. Content is a piece of it, and I think there's some of that in the social media piece as well, which is why, again, there's like the
Yeah.
diagrams and they have some of those shared frameworks. So for me, it was really about solving problems in my day job and explaining, why am I doing it this way? Why am I making this recommendation? Why is it working or not working? And getting to shared language, getting to shared understanding, and like getting buy-in for the different tactics. And it was like, oh, okay, well, if I'm struggling with this, maybe other people are struggling with this. Is there a common framework that all of these tactics and strategies roll into that has some first principles? So the playground analogy, which right now sits in the bucket or whatever, the circle called content strategy, I actually think is broader than that because from a campaign standpoint and a metric standpoint, right, how you think about the journey, if you think of it as a linear funnel or a looping decision journey versus a playground, that is a very big mindset shift into how you create your campaigns, how you create all of those touch points, which platforms you choose to show up on, your media mix, et cetera.
Yeah.
So when I initially came up with that framework, I was actually sitting in more of a content marketing team. And so my lens was more around content, but then I moved into product into life cycle. And so it's kind of funny because I'm like, well, actually, I would rename my own framework. And so it's funny because I I think sometimes people are like, oh, yeah, you wrote a book about AI. And I'm like, no. I wrote a book about humans and seeing the rise and the adoption of AI and how the language and mindsets have shifted around marketing given our current landscape in AI, there's some fundamental truths that have not changed. That's what the
Yeah.
book is really addressing. The tools are going to change, the platforms are going to change. Honestly, the metrics are going to change as we get more sophisticated and the tools change, right? The humans don't change. And
Yeah.
so I didn't really sit down and decide that, like, these are the buckets. It was more, I'm solving this problem in this context. Is there a more generalized framework that others might benefit from? And then obviously once the book came, it was like, great, I'll just pull all of these together. Funny enough, the publisher, when I first was working through the book proposal with them, they were like, is this actually 3 books? And I was like, no. I
I
will
don't
write you
got
one
three
book.
books
You
in
get
me.
one.